It is September 23rd, 1942. Smoke hangs low over the ruins of Stalingrad, and the Volga River burns in the distance under constant artillery fire. Generaloberst Friedrich Paulus, commander of the German Sixth Army, stands in a shattered command post west of the city. At 47 years old, Paulus has never led a large formation in an urban battle of this scale. Around him, maps are spread across a scarred wooden table, lines redrawn again and again as German units grind forward block by block. Adolf Hitler has ordered Stalingrad taken at any cost, not for strategy alone, but for symbolism. A city bearing Stalin's name must fall. Paulus knows the cost already. His divisions are exhausted. The Sixth Army has been fighting without pause since crossing the Don River in August. Infantry regiments that once fielded 3,000 men now muster barely 800. Tanks of the 14th and 24th Panzer Divisions are burning wrecks, disabled by Soviet anti-tank rifles and close-range grenades thrown from basements and rubble piles. The Luftwaffe flies constant sorties, but Soviet fighters and flak are taking their toll. Inside the city, German doctrine collapses. Blitzkrieg, designed for open maneuver, dies in the ruins. Every factory hall becomes a fortress. Every stairwell is defended. Soviet soldiers of the 62nd Army, under General Vasily Chukov, fight at point-blank range, often within the minimum firing distance of German artillery. Paulus requests operational freedom. He asks to pause, regroup, shorten his lines. The answer from Berlin is silence, followed by pressure. Hitler intervenes directly. He orders Paulus to continue the assault and forbids any withdrawal. Stalingrad must be held once taken. Paulus obeys. He always obeys. A staff officer by training, meticulous and loyal, he believes discipline will carry the day. But the calendar is turning. Winter is coming. And far beyond the ruined city, Soviet armies are massing in. Secrecy along the northern and southern flanks held not by Germans, but by under-equipped Romanian divisions. On the evening of September 23rd, Paulus signs orders committing his last fresh reserves into the factories along the Volga. The gamble is total. If the Soviets break elsewhere, there will be nothing left to stop them. The Sixth Army pushes forward again, unaware that history has already begun to close the trap. November 19th, 1942. Dawn breaks over the frozen steppe north of Stalingrad. A low mist clings to the ground, masking thousands of Soviet gun barrels, aimed at the thinly held front of the Romanian Third Army. At 7:20 hours, the silence shatters. More than 3,000 Soviet artillery pieces open fire at once. The bombardment is methodical, precise, and overwhelming. Romanian trenches vanish under explosions. Telephone wires are cut instantly. Command collapses within minutes. Generaloberst Friedrich Paulus hears the distant thunder from his headquarters inside the city. At first, reports are unclear. Paulus believes it is another localized attack, nothing the Sixth Army hasn't endured before. But this time is different. This is not Stalingrad. This is the flank, and it is collapsing fast. Soviet Operation Uranus is underway. Marshal Georgy Zhukov and General Alexander Vasilevsky have planned this blow for months, deliberately allowing the Germans to bleed themselves inside the city. Now, Soviet tank armies surge forward through the shattered Romanian defenses. T-34s advance in long columns, unhindered. Engines roaring across open ground where German armor should have been, but isn't. Paulus sends urgent messages to Army Group B. He requests permission to reposition units, to pull back before encirclement becomes inevitable. Hitler's response arrives within hours. The Sixth Army is ordered to stand fast. No retreat is authorized. Stalingrad must be held as a fortress. Paulus complies, despite growing evidence that the situation is unraveling beyond recovery. On November 20th, the southern flank collapses as well. Soviet forces smash through the Romanian Fourth Army. Snow begins to fall. Soviet pincers race toward each other with relentless speed. German attempts to form defensive lines fail. Fuel shortages, lack of reserves, and chaos cripple any coordinated response. Luftwaffe reconnaissance confirms the unthinkable. Soviet armor is deep in the German rear. Inside Stalingrad, German soldiers continue fighting room to room, unaware that escape routes are already being severed. Paulus remains at his command post, issuing orders, trusting that higher command will act. He believes relief will come. It must come. The Sixth Army cannot be abandoned. On November 23, 1942, near the town of Kalach, Soviet spearheads meet. The encirclement closes. Over 250,000 Axis troops are now trapped inside what will become known as the Stalingrad Kessel, the cauldron. When Paulus receives confirmation, witnesses later note he says nothing. He stares at the map for a long time, then quietly asks for updated supply estimates. Hitler responds with absolute certainty. The Luftwaffe, he declares, will supply the Sixth Army by air. Paulus knows the numbers. He knows it is impossible, but the order has been given. The deadliest mistake is no longer forming. It is complete. December 1942. The temperature inside the Stalingrad pocket drops to -20 degrees Celsius. Snow covers the dead where they fell, preserving bodies in twisted positions along frozen streets. For the Sixth Army, winter is no longer approaching. It has arrived. Friedrich Paulus now commands an army that exists on paper, but starves in reality. Hitler's promise of an airlift collapses almost immediately. The Luftwaffe needs a minimum of 300 tons of supplies per day to keep the Sixth Army combat effective. On the best days, fewer than 90 tons arrive. Aircraft are lost to weather, Soviet fighters, and ground fire. Ju-52 transports land on frozen fields under artillery attack, unload hastily, then take off overloaded with wounded soldiers. Many never return. Paulus receives daily reports of ration cuts. Bread allowances fall to 100 grams per man. Horse meat becomes the primary source of protein. Ammunition stocks shrink. Artillery batteries fire only when absolutely necessary. Frostbite cases exceed combat casualties. Field hospitals overflow, unheated and lacking medicine. Morphine runs out. Despite the reality, Hitler forbids any breakout attempt. Paulus proposes Operation Winter Storm coordination with Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, whose relief forces are assembling to the south. The plan requires Paulus to break out simultaneously. Hitler refuses. The Sixth Army must hold. Retreat is betrayal. Manstein's relief offensive begins on December 12th. His panzer divisions fight through Soviet defenses and reach within 50 kilometers of the pocket. German soldiers inside Stalingrad can hear distant artillery. Hope spreads briefly through the ruins. Paulus prepares contingency plans. He does not act without orders. The orders never come. Hitler insists the Sixth Army remain in place. He believes willpower can overcome logistics. Soviet forces exploit the delay, counterattacking Manstein's flanks. By December 23rd, the relief attempt fails. The last realistic chance to escape disappears into the snow. Inside the pocket, discipline erodes. Units merge without orders. Officers command whoever remains. Radios freeze. Fuel solidifies in drums. Soldiers burn furniture, books, even rifle stocks to stay warm. Paulus continues issuing structured reports to Berlin, maintaining formality as his army disintegrates. On December 24th, Paulus is promoted to Generaloberst. The gesture changes nothing. Soviet loudspeakers broadcast surrender appeals in German. Paulus forbids capitulation. He believes surrender without orders is dishonor. But the reality is undeniable. The Sixth Army no longer fights to win. It fights to survive. As Christmas passes, Soviet artillery tightens the ring. The pocket shrinks daily. Paulus studies his map, now covered in red arrows closing inward. The mistake has become a death sentence. And the end is no longer distant. It is moving closer by the hour. January 10th, 1943. At exactly 6:05 hours, the Soviet guns open fire again. This time, there is no attempt to break through. The objective is annihilation. More than 7,000 artillery pieces pound the shrinking Stalingrad pocket in a coordinated barrage that lasts over an hour. German positions vanish under ice, steel, and fire. What remains of the Sixth Army is pushed back step by step, bunker by bunker. Friedrich Paulus now commands fewer than 90,000 men capable of movement. Many lack weapons. Others lack the strength to stand. Soviet infantry advances behind rolling artillery, exploiting gaps immediately. German resistance is stubborn but fragmented. Units fight independently, cut off from command. clinging to cellars and factory basements. Hitler responds not with retreat orders, but symbolism. On January 30th, 1943, the 10th anniversary of his rise to power, Hitler promotes Paulus to General Field Marshal. The message is unmistakable. No German field marshal has ever surrendered. Paulus understands the implication. He is expected to die in Stalingrad. Paulus does neither. He does not commit suicide, and he does not surrender immediately. He continues to command what little remains, issuing orders that can no longer be enforced. Ammunition is nearly gone. Artillery is silent. Radios fail. Food supplies reach zero. Starvation replaces strategy. The Soviet ring tightens. On January 26th, Soviet forces split the pocket in two. Paulus's headquarters is now isolated in the southern sector. The northern group, under General Karl Strecker, continues fighting without contact. Paulus cannot reach them. The Sixth Army no longer exists as a single force. On January 31st, Soviet troops breach Paulus's final command post in the basement of a ruined department store near Red Square. Paulus is found exhausted, unshaven, physically broken. He refuses to issue a general surrender order, claiming he has no authority to do so without Hitler's consent. The southern pocket ceases organized resistance. 2 days later, on February 2nd, 1943, the northern group surrenders. The Battle of Stalingrad is over. Approximately 91,000 German and Axis soldiers march into captivity. Fewer than 6,000 will ever return home. The deadliest mistake is now undeniable. Hitler's refusal to allow withdrawal, his faith in air supply, and his obsession with symbolic victory have destroyed an entire army. Stalingrad marks the first complete annihilation of a German field army in the war. Paulus is taken into captivity. He will survive the war. The Sixth Army will not. And from this frozen city on the Volga, the balance of the Second World War begins to shift irreversibly. February 1943. News of Stalingrad spreads across Europe like a shockwave. For the first time since 1939, an entire German field army has ceased to exist. Not defeated and withdrawn. Not delayed and rebuilt. Destroyed. In Berlin, propaganda struggles to contain the truth. Headlines speak of heroic sacrifice. But the German people sense something deeper has gone wrong. The strategic consequences are immediate. Germany loses over 250,000 men killed, wounded, or captured. Thousands of experienced officers and non-commissioned leaders are gone forever. Equipment losses are catastrophic. Tanks, artillery pieces, vehicles, radios, years of industrial output erased in one winter. The myth of German invincibility shatters. For the Red Army, Stalingrad is transformation. Soviet command proves it can plan, conceal, and execute massive, deep operations. Zhukov's double envelopment becomes a template repeated again and again. Soviet morale surges. Factories beyond the Urals increase production. The initiative on the Eastern Front begins to shift decisively westward. Hitler responds not with adaptation, but rigidity. He doubles down on absolute control. Commanders are punished for initiative. Retreat becomes a crime. The lesson of Stalingrad, that flexibility saves armies, is ignored. German strategy becomes reactive, defensive, and increasingly desperate. Paulus's fate becomes symbolic. In Soviet captivity, he cooperates with anti-Nazi broadcasts, condemning Hitler's leadership. His defiance is political, not military. He has already lost the war when he chose obedience over judgment. His career becomes a warning etched into history. The Axis alliance fractures. Romania, Italy, and Hungary recognize the cost of Germany's decisions. Confidence erodes. Allied planners in London and Washington take notice. If Germany can lose an entire army, it can be beaten. On the front lines, the war does not pause. Soviet forces exploit momentum, driving German units back across hundreds of kilometers. The Eastern Front transforms from German advance to German retreat. From this moment forward, Germany never regains full strategic initiative in the East. Stalingrad is not the end of the war, but it is the point of no return. The deadliest mistake was not the battle itself. It was the decision to value ideology over reality, orders over conditions, pride over survival. An army was sacrificed to prove a man could not be wrong. As winter loosens its grip on the Volga, the ruins stand silent. Beneath the snow lie the remains of thousands who followed orders until none were left to follow. The final reckoning is still to come, but after Stalingrad, the outcome is no longer in doubt. In the months after Stalingrad, the Eastern Front enters a new phase. Germany no longer dictates tempo. Instead, it reacts, constantly, urgently, always a step behind. The Red Army advances with growing confidence, pressing westward through Kursk, Kharkov, and beyond. Each operation carries echoes of Stalingrad, deep planning, overwhelming artillery, and ruthless encirclement. Hitler's leadership hardens. Rather than adapting, he centralizes control further, issuing no retreat, orders that repeat the same fatal logic. Field commanders lose freedom of movement. Armies are held in exposed salients long after withdrawal is necessary. The mistake made at Stalingrad becomes a pattern. The summer of 1943 brings the Battle of Kursk, Germany's last major offensive in the east. It fails. German armored strength is shattered beyond repair. From that point forward, the Wehrmacht fights a defensive war of attrition it cannot win. Manpower shortages deepen. Fuel disappears. Air superiority slips away. For the Allies, Stalingrad validates a strategy of total commitment. In 1944, the Western Front opens with the Normandy landings. Germany now fights a two-front war it once feared and once avoided. Soviet forces surge through Eastern Europe. Cities fall one by one. The Red Army approaches Berlin. Friedrich Paulus watches these developments from captivity. He becomes a witness to the collapse he helped enable. He survives because he surrendered, an act Hitler sought to forbid, but survival brings no redemption. History remembers him not as a villain, but as a symbol of obedience in the face of disaster. By May 1945, the war in Europe ends. Berlin lies in ruins. Hitler is dead. Germany is occupied. The chain of events leading here can be traced back through countless decisions, but Stalingrad stands apart. It is the moment Germany loses its future. The deadliest mistake of Nazi Germany was not tactical miscalculation alone. It was the belief that ideology could replace logistics, that willpower could override geography, and that obedience mattered more than reality. At Stalingrad, that belief consumed an army. Today, the battlefield is quiet. The Volga flows past rebuilt streets. But beneath the ground lie the traces of a decision that changed history. Stalingrad did not just end an army. It ended an illusion. And once that illusion died, defeat became only a matter of time.